Now, Nintendo is an almost ancient company. They've been around since 1889, and in the 70s, they finally started making video games. And now, many years later, everyone knows about them. Almost everyone has heard of games like Super Mario and The Legend of Zelda. During those years, they've done many amazing things, from making some of the first and best 3D games ever, to reinventing the way portable consoles work with the Switch. However, during that time, there were also a lot of ideas scrapped. Not everything they came up with was a stroke of genius after all, but they do like to experiment and make new, surprising stuff. Ocarina of Time is a good example. However, thanks to all of this, there's a lot of scrapped content that most people have never seen in their life. However, today, you and I will have a look at some of the weirdest things that can be found hidden in the files of Ocarina of Time. So, let's jump right in. Number 5. Now, we all know that in Ocarina of Time, Nintendo did a pretty good job with creating the world itself. There are a good number of areas, transitioning from one to the other is easy, quite seamless and fast, and most areas have a nice introduction cutscene. Sure, it's nothing too fancy, because most of the camera work is quite simple. They use some circle transitions and panning shots. You know, stuff like that. However, before the game was released, Nintendo was more ambitious when it comes to the transitions and camera work. One good example of this is the very cool Triforce Transition that's actually in the game, but for some reason it wasn't used anywhere. Now you can force this transition to appear with GameShark code, like you can see right here, but normally there's no way you will ever see this. Now, I have no idea why they didn't include it in the game, because it looks quite good and works fine. It could be that it was a bit too extra. It kind of looks like a transition from a 90s cartoon show after all, so maybe they didn't use it because they wanted to go for a more minimalist style. It could be the case. However, the next piece of cut content is less mysterious, but still really cool. Number 4. Now, inside the files of a game like Ocarina of Time, you expect to come across all kinds of Zelda items, enemies, characters, and more. And usually, this is the case. However, inside of this game, you will also find one thing that doesn't belong. An actual Rwing from Star Fox! It was actually used by the developers to model Volvagia's flying animations that are seen during the boss fight. Now, I know this one is quite famous, but I really wanted to show it off and talk about it because it actually works! When you enter a map in which an Rwing is loaded, an animation plays depicting it flying around and doing a barrel roll. And it actually acts as an enemy. So it will fire at you with its laser beams, which is a bit scary because you don't have any advanced weaponry in The Legend of Zelda, of course. Well, except for Breath of the Wild, but luckily enough it can be vanquished with 3 slingshot hits or 1 from the boomerang. And upon defeat it will crash and explode in a huge mass of flaming red debris, which looks incredibly cool. Now, as far as I know, a lot of these things like the laser and explosion effects as well as the sound effects aren't used anywhere else in this game, so they put that in just for fun, I guess. And I love that they did that, because it makes fighting the Rwing so much better. However, another weird thing is that according to some spawn data tied to the Rwing, it should have spawned when opening a chest. And I have no idea why. Maybe Nintendo was designing another enemy around it that could pop out of a chest? Who knows? Regardless of that though, I do freaking love the fact that it's in the game. And it would be awesome to see like, I don't know, 20 of them at the same time attacking Link in Hyrule Field. Number 3. Now the next thing we will look at is incredibly weird, and while I haven't seen it before, there was one thing I didn't realize. It was actually seen in promotional material right here, and it's a lot bigger than I ever imagined it would be. I'm talking about an early version of the Great Fairy that didn't make it into the game, and it is, quite unique. This unused version of the Great Fairy looks very different from the original one. It's made out of glass or some sort of crystal. Aside from that, it is stationary and has no animations, and there might be a reason for that being the case. Its lack of movement might be linked to its file name, which is this, and that translates to Great Fairy Statue. So it seems like originally the Great Fairy was gonna be some sort of statue. A bit like the Hylia statues in Breath of the Wild, but in the end they got rid of it and created one of the weirdest and most sexual characters in a kid's game ever. Not sure if that was a good idea, but hey, this old version of the Great Fairy also looks a bit odd, but in a different way. Number 2. Now, overall, the combat moveset of Link in Ocarina of Time is quite basic. You got some slashes, stabs, and a spin attack. Nothing too surprising. Only in later games like the Wind Waker and Twilight Princess, they really expanded upon his moveset. However, originally in Ocarina of Time, they wanted to add one more attack. A very special one that looks quite cool. You can actually see it right here in this pre-release screenshot. Here, Link is using a beam blade attack, similar to the one he was able to use when his hearts were full in previous games. Now I know you can't see that too well, but luckily enough the people over at Heart4Games restored this attack to its full glory. Well, as much as they could, so credits to them for this footage, because I know it took a lot of effort to get this to work again. Now obviously this attack never made it into the final version of the game. There are only remnants of it in the code, and you can only restore Beam Blade attack partially by using these leftovers. Now personally, I'm quite disappointed they got rid of this attack because it would have been a nice addition to the game. It's some sort of reward for not taking damage after all. But luckily enough, in later games, they really expanded upon the combat. Number 1. Now for our last one, we are going to talk about something that can actually be seen in the game. However, if you end up seeing any of this, it actually means you did something illegal, and Nintendo is trying to punish you. Inside of the code of the game, there are actually anti-piracy features that are there to ruin the fun for anyone who stole the game. Because the game checks for the presence of the CIC 6105 security chip and uses countermeasures if it's not found. They did this in order to get rid of illegal copies as much as possible. And I bet it was pretty effective. Now, if this chip is not found in your copy of the game, a couple of things will be different. For example, Zelda will look different, because the game will reshape her hair into a golden pentagon. Aside from that, it will also stop you from finishing the game, because the metal bars in Ganon's castle, which blocked the exits during the escape sequence, won't open. Normally, Zelda's able to open the bars, but if the chip is not detected, then the bars will not open. Zelda will instead run straight through them and leave you behind to die. So you can't actually beat the game. Aside from that, the fishing minigame also doesn't work properly, but that isn't too important, to be honest. Now, I bet most of you have never actually seen these anti-piracy measures, or any of the other things I've mentioned in this video. But one thing is certain, they are incredibly interesting, and a bit weird at times. Thanks for watching, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this video. Be sure to click on more videos, subscribe, click the bell button, leave a like, tell me in the comments which one you thought was the weirdest. And let me know if you like the old format, which we're kind of going back to a bit now. If you like that more than all the wacky Wily adventure stuff. I will also see this in audience retention. I will analyze the data. Thank you for watching. I love you. Mwah.